All right, today we're going to talk about solving equations. But we're going to do something that's a little different than what you do in math. These equations have no numbers. No numbers. Sorry about that. A little bit of a brain fart. These equations don't have any numbers associated with them at all. So that means we're going to be talking about all variables. The reason that we sometimes talk about all variables in physics is that it is very easy when you look at an equation with just the variables to see how one thing moves and the other thing is affected. The example that we're going to be working with, at least for the first part of this, is our density formula that we used last year. Density equals mass, which is an M, over volume, which is a capital V. Okay. Looking at this, without putting any numbers in, if the volume goes up, I know that the overall density is going to go down. You can plug that in your calculator and see how it is. It's useful to look at this in general case. It makes life a lot easier when we start talking about stuff. That being said, I am not going to require that you solve equations with just variables all the time. As we move into physics a little bit more, we'll start using actual numbers, but for right now, we're just going to look at it with variables. Now, you have all heard of the order of operations, and our little acronym for that is PEMDAS. P-E-M-D-A-S. When you're plugging numbers into a formula, you take care of what's in the parentheses first, and then the exponents, and then you multiply or divide, and then you add or subtract. So it's parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add or subtract. When we are solving equations, however, we do the reverse of this. Reverse PEMDAS. We start with subtraction and addition, then we multiply and divide, then we do things with exponents. We will look at many examples of this. Okay? We're going to keep the reverse PEMDAS thing in the back of our heads for everything that we do. This first formula, we're going to take D equals M over V, and the first thing we're going to do is solve for M. Now, what that means is that we want M on top. We want it to be the numerator and by itself. So, let's take our formula. D equals M over V. Now we have to think of something that we can do to get rid of this V. Now if we multiply this by V over 1, the V's will cross out. And then get rid of the V's and the M will be all by itself. But if I multiply one side by V, I have to multiply the other side by V over 1. Divide anything by 1 and you just get itself. So you get volume times density is equal to mass. Boom. Just solved our first equation. Let's take the same thing and do something that always throws almost all of my students off. And that is solve for V. Now what we want here again is V on top by itself. Oops, sorry. Let's erase that. See how that worked? By itself. So, here's our formula again. Density equals mass over volume. Since this just has multiply and divide, that's all we're going to do with it. So, right now, V is on the bottom. I don't want V to be on the bottom. I want V to be on the top. That's the first thing I want. So what I have to do to get V on the top is multiply by V. So I'm going to multiply both sides by V. It's the same thing as doing V over 1. I just don't have an over 1 anymore. So because of that, the V's cross out over here. And I'm left with volume times density pardon, is equal to mass. Now, V is not by itself yet. So, in order to get V by itself, I have to divide by D. When I do that, the D's over here cross out. But if I divide by D on one side, I have to do the same thing to the other side. So when we finish up, we have volume equals mass over density. We have solved our second literal equation. We're going to do a couple more practices with this, and then we're going to end. That's all we're going to talk about tonight. And erase all. Yes. Okay. So, erasing all that, we're going to look at a different equation, and we're going to remember that we are doing PEMDAS, P-E-M, but we're doing it backwards. So, we have K equals, this is kinetic energy, we'll deal with this later in the year, 1/2 mass times velocity squared. That's a lowercase b. So this is our equation. The first thing that we're going to do, the first thing that we're going to do we're going to solve for V. Okay, now V, let's write this down again. V has an exponent multiplied next to it. And if we were doing regular PEMDAS, that'd be the second thing we dealt with. That'd be in part of the first step. But since we're doing reverse PEMDAS, we're going to take care of our multiplying and dividing first. And then we'll take care of the exponent. So again, the goal is to get V on top by itself. I'll make you sick of that phrase by the end of this. So, I notice that I have a 1/2 over here, and I want to get rid of that. In order to get rid of a 1/2, I multiply by 2. 1/2 times 2 is 1, so that term goes away. But if I multiply by 2 on one side, I have to multiply by 2 on the other side. So, our 1/2s cross out, and we're left with 2 times K is equal to M times V squared. Now we're still working with multiply and divide. Okay? So we're going to take this, and again, I want V by itself and on top. We're going to divide by the mass. If I divide by the mass over here, it goes away, but I have to do it to both sides. So now I'm left with 2K over M is equal to V squared. I'm done multiplying and dividing. V is as by itself as it can get right now. So now I'm going to deal with the exponent. Now, if you remember back, if I need to get rid of something that is squared, just take the square root of it. So when I'm finished, this side stays the same. 2K over M square rooted is equal to V. That's what happens when I take the square root of V squared. I just get V. Okay? This is an example of the kind of math that we're going to be doing just for a little bit. Okay, question 2 that I'm going to ask for this same equation is to solve for M. And again, we want M on top by itself. So what I want you to do at home while you watch this video is to pause for just a second and try to solve for M on your own. And then after that pause, I'm going to go through it, but I'm going to go through it a little quicker this time. So pause now. Okay, you should be done solving it. So let's go ahead and get rid of everything and get m on top by itself. So again, the first thing we're going to do is multiply each side by 2. Because when I do that, the 1/2 goes away. So I've got 2k equals mv squared. I'm solving for m this time. So what I have to do is try to get rid of that v squared. So I'm going to divide each side by v squared because that makes the v squared go away on this side. Anything divided by itself is 1. And so I've got, well, I'm finished now. 2 times k over v squared is equal to the mass, m. All right. We're going to do one more big example, and that's going to be it. Tomorrow in class, we're going to do a lot of practice solving these equations. I have 28 problems that we're all going to work. Some of that's going to be in groups, some of that's going to be all together. So, the equation that we're looking at this time is v squared equals v with a little 0 beside it. That's all one variable. That thing is squared. Plus 2a and d minus d0. Again, d0 is its own little variable. And what I want us to do with this equation is solve for d, the first d right there. So I'm going to make that a little bit easier to see. We're going to solve for the guy in red. Okay? And we're going to remember that we're doing reverse PEMDAS, which is SADMEP. Maybe that's going to turn into a thing that you say, but we're going to do SADMEP. Okay? Which means the first thing that we're going to do is subtract and add. We're going to do addition and subtraction steps first. So the goal is to get d by itself. But before I can do that, I have to do addition and subtraction. So the first thing that we're going to do is from each side subtract v0 squared. I have to do the same thing to each side. Now, if I subtract v0 squared from v0 squared, I get 0. So v0 squared has gone away on this side. I have 0 plus 2a d minus d. Oh, I'm going to go back to the black on this. D minus d0 is equal to v squared minus v0 squared. Nothing cancels out there, so I'm just going to bring it back down. So, keep no well. I don't need this 0 anymore because it's a 0, so we're going to pretend it's not there. So now I have v minus v0 squared equals 2a d minus d0. Looking at this equation, I want to get this whole term by itself. Parentheses is the last thing I do, so I'm not going to subtract d or d0. I am now at the divide and multiply step. So I want to get rid of everything over here that is not d minus d0. So I'm going to take this side and divide by the whole thing 2 times a. If I do that, they cross out. But if I divide one whole side by 2a, I have to divide the whole other side by 2a. So these cross out. Now that term's no longer over here, and I've got v squared minus v0 squared over 2a is equal to d minus d0. Now, in order to get d by itself, I don't have to do any more multiplying or dividing. I can go straight now to well, I'm taking care of that whole parentheses, I guess. I am now dealing with the parentheses. There are no more exponents. Okay, inside of this parentheses, I'm going to have to add d0 to each side. By adding d0, I have negative d0 plus d0. At this point, I don't need parentheses. Those things go away. And now I have my equation. Sorry about that. D is equal to d0 plus the term v squared minus v0 squared all over 2a. Now, if yours is a little bit out of order, that's just fine. But if it is mathematically this same thing, then we're good to go. Okay? So, the things that we need to remember are reverse PEMDAS, or SADMEP. You want to go through it that way. And we always want the thing that we're solving for on top and by itself.